Good morning, everyone. Welcome to an all-new Artsbeat TV radio from Westfield Community Programming, 89.5 FM WSKB, and our media partners at Agawam Media and Southwick Community Television. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach, and today we're going south of the border to Goodspeed Musicals with Michael Fling. They've got a festival of new musicals, which happens every year, and Goodspeed is known for developing new musicals and sending them on to other ports of call. A couple of them may be familiar to you: Mana La Mancha, Shenandoah, Annie, Irving Berlin's Holiday Inn are just a sampling of shows that began their life at Goodspeed Musicals. This three-day festival, which happens this month, will present some new musicals along with cabaret performances and seminars and all of that. And you don't know, but maybe a show that you see in its beginning stages at this festival may be Broadway's biggest hit a year from now. Good morning, Michael. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
First of all, Happy New Year. And tell me a little bit, give us a rundown of the festival.
Well, Happy New Year to you too. The festival is a wild and really exciting time of year for us at Goodspeed. So we partner with the University of Hartford and their BFA musical theater students. And through this long partnership, they are the actors that we use to develop these new musicals over the course of 2 weeks. So a standard development process in the city for a lot of new musicals, you have an hour limit as to how many hours you can actually work on the show before you do presentations and whatnot. Because we have this academic partnership, we're able to give the shows even more development time. And it's also a great opportunity for the students to actually get their hands on new work and understand what that process is, as opposed to what it is to work with a text that's established and whatnot. So we do three presentations over the course of sorry, my phone started ringing. Not helpful. We do three presentations over the course of the weekend of three new musicals. And over the course of the festival and years past, we've had shows that we have continued to develop at our Terrace Theater in Chester, which is also dedicated to new work. And some of those shows people may have seen from passing through to Little Miss Perfect, actually, that we're about to do out there, and a number of other projects. But also things like Come From Away, which had its first American presentation ever here at Goodspeed in our festival, and then went on to be the Tony Award-winning smash hit Broadway musical. So we have a lot of pride in the shows that we do at the festival.
How do you select the shows? Do people send you scripts, or do you know of a composer, let's say, or a lyricist, and say, show us what you're doing? How do the plays get chosen?
The short answer is yes. Hold on just 1 second. I'm so sorry. Lauren, I'm on an interview. I need to call you back later. Bye. Hi. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
The short answer is yes. We do all kinds of things to meet new musicals, from authors that we have relationships with over the course of a long period of years, or people just kind of blind send us things and we'll read it. We lovingly refer to the process as kissing a lot of frogs to find the eventual prince somewhere in there. So we go to readings, presentations of things in the city. So a lot of my job, I'm back and forth between New York for presentations and workshops and reading and all the sorts of things. But in the course of a year, we probably vet anywhere from 75 to 100 different new musicals to land on ultimately three for the festival.
So fill us in a little bit on each of the three that people could see along with some of the cabaret things that surround them. And as we're talking about this, you can order tickets either for an individual event or for the entire package at goodspeed.org. So if you're thinking of going, check the website because it has really a lot of in-depth information about the festival and a sneak peek of what's coming to Goodspeed in 2025.
Yeah, very all exciting things. And if you are interested in coming to the festival, I would recommend hopping on tickets pretty soon because we're actually at the Terrace in Chester, which has less seating than we would normally have for the festival. So tickets are already tight. It's already a hot ticket. But the three shows that we'll be doing this year, one of them is an adaptation of Romeo and Juliet called Romeo and Juliet: Fire on the Bayou, set in New Orleans around Mardi Gras, and is a really exciting adaptation by Kevin Ramsey and Nigel Robinson. Kevin Ramsey, who is the head of the theater program at the Hart School, and they've taken obviously this classic love story and set it down in contemporary New Orleans with a lot of jazz infested, blues infested music that is really, really delightful. So we're excited about that one. And then the next show on Saturday is a new musical called Oi Band, which is about a group of four Orthodox Jewish girls who come of age and are no longer allowed to sing in front of men based on the rules of Orthodox Judaism. And so they disguise themselves as boys and kind of take off and become this international boy band sensation called Oi Band. It's an absolutely delightful, fun, empowering story about these young girls who, kind of change things about themselves in their appearance to do what they love and what they discover in that process, and the how you're different from your parents and all the kinds of things. And then the last show is called The Carol of the Bells, which, yes, that is Christmas themed for anyone who may be familiar with that famous Christmas song. But it's kind of an anti-Christmas musical, very much in the style of Book of Mormon, South Park, and Family Guy. Very irreverent humor about a young girl who her parents have divorced and her grandma is about to die, and Christmas is their favorite holiday, and she tries to reunite her family for one last holiday for before grandma goes. And her very dysfunctional family, including screw ups and things. It's quite hilarious, and we actually did it as a cabaret presentation last year for the festival. So we also offer residencies for writers as a part of the festival, and that culminates in a cabaret performance that happens after the presentations. And Nevada Lozano, who wrote Carol of the Bells, did a cabaret presentation last year and about blew the roof off of the Gelston House. And I was like, we're going to have a riot on our hands if we don't do this show next year in the festival. So a really exciting lineup of three new musicals.
So after these three new works are presented in a kind of a workshop situation performed by students at Hart, what happens to them afterwards? Does Goodspeed have the right to take them on, or does the creators, it goes back to them and they do what they want with it?
Again, great question. The answer is yes. Both are true. So, in a lot of cases, we do take out a formal, limited period option on the shows that we do in the festival. So, if our audience does really respond to it and we continue to love it and have passion for it, we can put it into our developmental pipeline, be that in a developmental production at the Terrace or main stage at the Goodspeed or whatever that may be. In some cases, some shows come with they've had a little bit more development, or they're a commission of another theater, or all the other ways that new musicals are born. So sometimes we forfeit that option and we say, actually it's okay that we can't have first right of refusal on this. So it goes back and forth, but the answer is yes. So we have taken, like I said earlier, we've taken many shows from the festival over the years. Private Jones, which we just did at the Terrace in 2023. I almost said last year. That is now officially 2 years ago. Was a festival born at the festival. The Great Emmy Award, which we did a couple of years ago. Audiences will hear more about that soon. Little Miss Perfect, Passing Through, I talked about, and a number of others over the course of years that have gone on. So the answer is yes. Yeah, it's kind of our first opportunity to introduce a show to our most dedicated new works audience, who are our friends at the festival and the ones who do the packages and whatnot, and kind of dip our toe in the water as one, giving the show a developmental opportunity, but two, seeing how the audience responds to it.
Now, you're presenting brand new works at this festival, and then during the regular season, there'll be another set of new works done as full productions at the Terrace Theater. And maybe one of those might graduate to the main stage in East Haddam or go somewhere else. I've seen a couple of shows at the Terrace that I just wonder what became of them afterwards. There was the musical, the Dolly Parton musical, and I guess that went to London.
It went to London, yeah. I think it either has just opened or is about to open in the West End. So it should be a rip roaring success over there. And Dolly's even now writing a musical about her like her life story that's going to be on Broadway in a couple years. So I guess we do have our finger on the pulse a little bit. But yeah, so Dolly Parton went to London. Private Jones, I just talked about, did a very celebrated production down in DC last year, that just won a bunch of like DC Best Awards at the end of the year. Really, really an excellent show by Marshall Palet. And what else? What are the other shows?
Well, I saw a
we do
show.
so many over the years. It's like I start to
Yeah.
lose track. Like,
One of the shows that I saw last year, and it ended up in my year-end recap for Mass Live in the Westfield News, is my favorite new musical was A Complicated Woman. I was fascinated by it, as I had said in our year-end recap on Artsbeat. When I was acting and still doing musical theater, I had interviewed for the Kenley Players and John Kenley, and like a lot of other people in the business, sort of knew the story or the backstory of who he was. And to see it on stage in a musical that was fully fleshed out, but to me, had a score that was so reminiscent of the time period that Kenley was producing musicals and everything. I thought for sure it would have a new life after Goodspeed. Does it?
So I can't really talk about it, because like these things are very, very delicate in terms of all the negotiations and whatnot. But it's a really interesting story for those who may not be aware. And it was amazing to me and to all of us the amount of people in the theater industry who knew John Kenley, auditioned for the Kenley Players. It was their first professional gig, or whatever that may be. A person that most people did not know the name of. I did not know the name of even, prior to meeting the show, A Complicated Woman. And you're right, with Jonathan Brielle, who wrote the score, and is a dear friend of Goodspeed. Just fantastic music that was so of the period, and took what was a, obviously even by title, complicated story, and made it really, really accessible for folks. And essentially the double life that John Kenley lived, between his existence up in Ohio doing summer theater, and his off-season existence down in Florida living as a woman.
You know
So
what's interesting about John Kenley? If you go on Facebook to any of the Broadway fans pages and stuff, there are people that post ads and playbills from summer theater of years ago, and they'll post every so often like John Kenley's 1968 season or 1969 season, something like that. And you see the list of these shows, all musicals, with major Hollywood and television names of the time. People like Betty White or Ethel Merman, Ann Miller, coming to these three small theaters in Ohio and performing Broadway hits. To me, I don't think that there's any summer theater program around the country that can do stuff like that anymore.
yeah, no, he pioneered that model of producing that then a lot of other theaters picked up on and tried to do, but never quite did it to the level that he did it. And a really fascinating figure that somewhat invented star casting, at least in theater, like putting a big name in a show. He kind of came up with that, and it's really it's fascinating to see all the stories and all the people in the industry who were like, I was shocked. Like every time I was at the theater, someone would come up to me and be like, I knew John Kenley, and like I had this experience with him, or I worked at the Kenley Players, and it was I had the best summer of my life, and just it just really fascinating story.
It's amazing. What about some of the other new works that Goodspeed has produced in recent years? This past summer, the musical Maggie. Do I know that a lot of New York people and people in the industry come to Goodspeed to see the new works, and that Goodspeed has really become one of the nation's major incubators for musical theater. In your experience, how long does it take from something new at Goodspeed till the time it makes it to Broadway or London? Does it happen quickly, or does it evolve over time?
Well, the standard the answer that a lot of people give is that it takes about 7 years from first sitting down to write something to then opening on Broadway. That seems to be the average gestation period. I would probably say it's on the it's probably yeah, that probably is the average actually. But there are a lot of shows that take a whole lot longer than 7 years. And there are shows that happen really quickly. We're not in the age of Rodgers and Hammerstein any longer, where they were churning out a new show once every 2 years. That's just not really the way that the that development works anymore. And I have a lot of feelings about that, but that's for another interview.
Yeah.
But so by the time it gets to something being on our stage, it's probably you know there is no one answer, because like Holiday Inn turned around very quickly from idea to actually being on stage. And then but then things like Anne of Green Gables that we did in 2022, we had been committed to it for 3 years already, after it had been in development for 3 years. Now some of that has to do with a pandemic that we shut down and all the things, but like a show like Maggie's probably about 6 years in development prior to being at Goodspeed, and then you get into the waiting game of Broadway and or London, and theater availability, which can end up being um, a multi-year battle, and then you're doing another workshop to remind theater owners that it exists, and all sorts of things. So from Goodspeed, I would say it's probably it's hard to do an average, but we're actually, being a regional theater and doing a premiere is about like the teenage stage, I guess, of a musical. We're like halfway through that development process.
Well, let's talk very quickly about the 2025 season in the Opera House in East Haddam. And by the way, for those of you listening or watching, the Festival of New Musicals is at the Terrace Theater in Chester, which just celebrated its 40th anniversary. It's smaller space than Goodspeed Opera House on the River, but Chester's a delightful town, and it's the theater has parking, and there are restaurants and cafes and all of that nearby in Chester. And I'm going to throw out the website for you one more time. It's goodspeed.org. If you want to see the Festival of New Musicals, you need to get your tickets really fast. Just don't drive down to Chester that day to get tickets. But what's happening at Goodspeed on the main stage for 2025?
So Goodspeed main stage, we're opening the season with Ragtime, the Ahrens and Flaherty modern masterpiece, masterwork, however we want to talk about it, which is thrilling. We've been trying to do the show for a very long time. It is one of the larger shows we've ever tried to put on what is famously a small stage. So that's opening the season, and then we're going right after that to 20th anniversary production of All Shook Up, which is the Elvis Presley jukebox musical that actually began life at the Terrace over in Chester 20 years ago. So one of those examples of a show that goes on to Broadway, had a short life on Broadway, but is one of the most licensed shows in the country. I did it in high school back in the day. We were one of the first high schools to do it. It's a popular favorite of summer stocks, high schools, and community theaters everywhere. It's a delightful show. With great arrangements of Elvis music. So that's our summer show. And then we're going to a 50th anniversary production of A Chorus Line, which is another show that we've been trying to do for a very long time. and really exciting. We're doing the original choreography from Michael Bennett, restaged by Parker Essie, and directed by Rob Ruggiero, a director that we have a long relationship with, and brilliant director at TheaterWorks Hartford, among many other places across the country. And then we're closing out the season with the world premiere of Jerry Herman's last score that he ever wrote for Angela Lansbury for television, called Mrs. Santa Claus, which is a really exciting, as we talk about our commitment to new work and whatnot. We're really excited to be giving life to the last, set of notes that Jerry Herman wrote before he died, all for Angela Lansbury, for a delightful, if somewhat forgotten, TV movie from the '90s. But it's a delightful new adaptation by Alexis Shear that should be so much fun at the holidays.
Yeah, and it's a perfect tribute to Jerry Herman, who's primarily known for Hello Dolly in Maine, but wrote some beautiful stuff besides that.
Oh, Mac, and if you need a good new musical, or not new musical, but if you're not familiar with Mac and Mabel, highly encourage you to go listen to the Mac and Mabel album. It's one of my favorites.
It's one of
and
mine.
Latasha Fall. It's so good. He's so good.
I went to see it at Encores when they did it a couple of years ago, and I did see the original because I was in college and I worked in the box office at the Kennedy Center where it had a tryout. And I always saw that I was done work at the second act. So I had to find a data that I was off to see how it started. But I thought it would be the biggest hit of all times. And I was surprised when it failed on Broadway. And when I saw it at Encores, I think it's the best of all of his scores. The story still bothers me to some degree, but I mean, it's a fable in a lot of ways, and you can let go some of the things in the story that don't work for the stuff that does. It's absolutely a beautiful show.
Yeah, and it's one of those that I think every true theater nerd wants to fix Mac and Mabel, because the music is so good. And it's an interesting story. They just never quite cracked how to tell it, it seems like. So I think for the rest of my life, we'll probably be waiting for the revival, kind of like Merrily We Roll Along, that just had a huge successful revival, and everyone's like, oh, it's been fixed. I think not everybody, a lot of theater nerds are hoping that Mac and Mabel gets the same treatment someday.
Well, I would certainly hope so. And when I need to be lifted up and I need a score from a Broadway show that uplifts and all that, Mac and Mabel, from Hundreds of Girls to Tap Your Troubles Away. It's one great song after another. And I don't know, I think audiences today may accept the story more than they did back when it opened. And the idea that you'd have somebody cocaine addicted as a lead and things were, that's not a Broadway musical. But when I saw the Encore's production, I thought, well, it did survive the test of time. And in a more contemporary environment, it's not unusual.
Yeah, 100%. And also those, the original recording with Robert Preston and Bernadette Peters, and some of those ballads are like some of the best, most heartfelt, wonderful songs. So it really is. I share your love of Mac and Mabel.
Did Mac and Mabel ever, was it ever done at Goodspeed?
We did do it in like 2000, I want to say, with Christiane Knoll as Mabel. And Jerry did come up actually and do a little bit of work on the show. We just had a meeting with his estate last week, and or earlier this week. And Donna Lynn, who is our artistic director, who was here at the time, they were reminiscing about the times that Jerry came up and worked on some of the shows that had been flops of his that he wanted to make work, also including Dear World, which Encores just did a couple seasons ago, that he continued to work on at Goodspeed. So it feels very much in the vein of not only our history, but the history of him too, that we're doing this premiere next year.
Yeah, in doing Ragtime, I mean, some of the creators of Ragtime are still alive and working in the theater, and in a chorus line to a less degree, but some of the people involved in the original production are still around. Do they come up and check out shows, the Goodspeed productions?
Yes, they do, very often. So we do have a reputation as being a wonderful incubator for new musicals and a wonderful place to revive old ones, and give them a new breath of life. So we were just talking today with Ahrens and Flaherty about some casting things for Ragtime, and And Stephen has been involved in how we're with the orchestration that we're doing and what parts are important versus not to him and all the things. So yeah, authors are definitely in and around, even when it's a revival. They will often pop up.
And it's got to be difficult to take a huge musical like Ragtime. I saw it at Barrington Stage a couple of years ago, and it's physically a big production, and so is the chorus line. Even though it takes place on a stage of a theater, it's still big. How do you fit them into the small Goodspeed?
It's the ever challenging question that we ask every time we're doing basically any show, because all musicals are just big. Like it is very rare that musicals are small. So with Ragtime, we'll have 26 people on stage, and it's the work of the creative team and the design team to figure out how we realistically depict the things that we need to depict scenically in a more intimate setting. And then with Chorus Line, you're right. It is. Uh, it's a big show in terms of bodies on stage. You have 17 people who are standing on a line, and one of the big questions for us for a very long time in the estates that represent Chorus Line, where we don't think you can fit the 17 bodies just across the front of your stage. We think it's too small, and then so we have to build out over the pit a little bit, and which you have to do anyway for Chorus Line because you're not supposed to see the band. They're supposed to be not in the room so that it feels like a real audition process. So we're building out over the pit. So there are little things and little tricks and things that we have. We've got a lot of fantastic people on staff who've been here for a long time and know the space backwards and forwards and how to make the, big set pieces fit in very small spaces off stage. So we're lucky to have a good team that makes it all happen.
Michael, do you have a wish list, since you're a musical theater nerd like I am? Do you have a wish list of shows you'd love to see Goodspeed do or encores do that have just been overlooked?
Absolutely. Of course I have. I have a list for encores and I have a list for Goodspeed. So it's part of my job to help Goodspeed figure out, what shows we're going to do and whatnot. And there are some like my taste, because I'm a real nerd, like there are certain shows that don't have mass appeal that I think would just be stunning at the Opera House. But if not very different and bold for Goodspeed, I guess I'd say. Thinking specifically of I love Assassins, and Assassins is a very dark show, but just because of the things it's talking about with history and whatnot, I think it'd be stunning in the Opera House. I don't know that that's ever going to happen, but I like to dream that it would happen. And that's a dark show. People really struggle with that show, so I don't know. But also all the way to like I'm a huge Sound of Music lover, so like I want us to do Sound of Music because I think it would be glorious in the intimate space, and really focus on the beauty of that story. So that's another one that we circle around a lot of titles and talk about a lot of things.
I
And
got to throw
actually,
two in there. One,
yeah, please do.
High Spirits and Golden Boy are two that I would love to see at Goodspeed.
We have talked about Golden Boy a fair amount, actually, because we have a long relationship with the Strauss estate as well. And they want to do something with Golden Boy. So we've talked about Golden Boy, actually. And then High Spirits is interesting you bring up because I don't know the score very well, but I love Blithe Spirit, the play that it's based on. I absolutely love. So that's one that's always in the back of my mind as a potential show for us or something that might be interesting. And as far as encores goes, I personally, if Encores wants to reach out to me about directing an Encores production of The Boyfriend, I would be happy to do so. It's like some of those Encore shows. Encores has shifted its programming a little bit. It's not doing as many of the beloved shows of a bygone era. It's shifting a little bit more contemporary, which I think is fair on some level. Like there are certain shows that are really well known to we theater people, but are not known to the mass public. That qualify as an encore is like, oh, we're going to revive something that people don't do typically. And oh, what was the other? There's some other show that encores I was thinking about the other day. I was like, oh, that's a good encore show. I've forgotten it. So
Well, every time I chat with you or Donna Lynn or somebody from Goodspeed, my mind starts to spin about musicals that I think would be great there or at Encores. I mean, if it wasn't for Goodspeed producing revivals of musicals that needed to be seen along with new works, which I believe influenced the Encores people to try to do something in a concert version. But I think that if it isn't for Goodspeed and Encores, a lot of our musical theater history would be lost.
I think that is very true. As we as times change and people change and popular habits are not necessarily about listening to musicals, it's why I'm so excited that Wicked is having a mainstream moment because musicals are cool and musicals can be fun. But yeah, there is a lot of musical theater history that because it's theater and it disappears at a certain point, it evaporates after the instant after you do it. So it is really important to us and to me that we preserve the history of musical theater.
Well, folks, you can see the Goodspeed Festival of New Musicals January 17th through the 19th at the Terrace Theater in Chester, Connecticut. For details, goodspeed.org. Michael, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Come back again and talk as we get into spring and Ragtime's in rehearsal. Come back and talk about the main stage season.
Would absolutely love to. Happy to be on anytime. Give me a ring.
Terrific. We've been talking with Michael Fling. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back with more Artsbeat. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. I'm Mark Auerbach. Don't go away.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Dunkin' Donut Shops of Westfield and the Sardinia family. It's nice to know that even as the world changes, Dunkin' Coffee remains the same at 7 convenient locations throughout Westfield.
Hi, it's Bob Plass, and I have Wow, It's Tuesday every Tuesday, 6 to 8. Wow, it's Tuesday.
Community Radio
89.5 WSKB.
I did it!
Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Artsbeat, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer today. We have an encore presentation for you, an interview that we did in 2023 with playwright, actor, and therapist Jay Sefton, who wrote the autobiographical Unreconciled. It premiered in 2023 as a workshop at Chester Theater and then was mounted last summer as a full production, which has since gone to theaters in Ireland, New York, and is currently in Pittsburgh on its way to Los Angeles. Here's Jay Sefton.
I'm your host, Mark Auerbach, and today we're getting a chance to talk with Jay Sefton, who is the actor who some of you may have seen in Berkshire Theater Group and Wham Theater's recent production of What the Constitution Means to Me. However, he's got a new work called Unreconciled, which is his play, which he will be performing in a workshop production at the Chester Theater Company, July 20th and 21st. It's directed by James Barry. And as we chat, if you're interested in information about that, it's all available at chestertheater.org. Jay, it's nice to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me, Mark.
You have this dual career. I mean, you are working, you're a licensed mental health counselor. You've got a master's in psychology. You have a clinical practice. You're an actor, an equity actor who's appeared in several area theaters, Wham, Berkshire Theater, Majestic. You're working on this new work and all of that. Where do you find time to do it all?
Well, I took a big break from theater for a while when I went back to get my master's in psychology, like 2012, and so there was a pretty big break in there where I just concentrated on that and getting the practice up and running. And I'd done some shows at the Majestic, and then this production at Berkshire Theater Group and Wham was the first one since doing Outside Mullingar 5 years ago at the Majestic. So. And in that time during COVID, I co-wrote Unreconciled with Mark Basquill, who is a psychologist living in North Carolina. We've only done Zoom, but we're going to meet in Chester for the first time in person, July 20th, I think.
Well, so the Chester performances, that's a workshop. Is this the first time this play is being performed?
Yes.
So that puts a lot of pressure on you to, is it fully staged or is it more of a reading?
It's fully staged and with some tech elements and hopefully fully memorized. And, so
but
yeah.
You're the playwright, so if you have to improvise because you lose a line here and there, nobody's going to know, right?
Yeah, they won't. They won't know.
What made you decide to write a play? And I know this is very autobiographical. What made you decide to do this?
Um, it sprung out of, in 2018, I had participated in an independent reconciliation and reparations program that the Archdiocese of Philadelphia had set up for victims of sexual abuse during childhood by clergy members. And so I went through that process, and at the end of it, I wrote an op-ed based on my experience. So this play is in large part that experience of going through that program, and also it goes back into childhood and growing up in Philadelphia. But I had written an op-ed, and it got published in Harrisburg, and there's about 20 years worth of struggle in Harrisburg to get legislation for survivors to have a 2-year look back window. And this was kind of an op-ed written about that, and then it looked like it was going to go through. It didn't. I wrote another op-ed, and it was kind of out of that experience of writing these opinion pieces and getting connected further with the community of survivors in Pennsylvania, and then some in other states. People reached out and connected with me after that. That's how I met Mark, the co-playwright of the play. And so it was through that. I had done a solo show in 2008 that led me to the field of psychology. And so I had always thought of maybe if I had it in me to write another show, I would write more fully on this topic. And then those op-eds kind of led me to do that.
Is it difficult writing about, I mean, it's a serious subject and it's a painful subject to write about in general, but the fact that you experience this, is it difficult or is it cathartic?
I would say both. I think that's a good question. I would say it's both. There are moments that are hard and then moments that are cathartic. And then I think the writing process, because of sort of what it demands of you, there's some distance that's also created in there. At some point I'm playing these characters and it becomes about the staging and the acting, and so there's a whole bunch of things that happen in there. I think sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it's hard to it's just the technical aspect of like, how do I shape this into a play that works? And then sometimes it's the material.
And how did James Barry at Chester get involved?
Early on, when I just had ideas, I was out to dinner with my wife and Len Berkman and Joyce Berkman, and we were talking, and I said, I've got this idea. And Len Berkman said, you should talk with James. And I didn't know James at the time. And so we did. We talked through some ideas. And then I went away for about a year and a half, maybe, about that. And he had great feedback and thoughts about the ideas. And by the time I came back around, and Mark and I had what we thought was a draft that was ready to be read out loud, Len and Joyce said, why don't you come over to our house? We'll have brunch and you can read it out loud, and we'll invite James over. And by that point, James and Tara had become the co-producing artistic directors at Chester. And so we had brunch, and I read the play in their living room. And James said, there's a dark week in between productions. What do you think about doing this for a couple nights as a workshop production? So that's kind of how that came about.
And they're both really adept at staging solo works. I mean, they've performed in many solo works and directed and staged that. So I think it's a great venue and opportunity for you.
Yeah, I was thrilled.
How much rehearsal time do you get for something like this? Do you get a full rehearsal run like you might like you did with Wham, or is this a shorter period of time to rehearse it?
It'll be shorter in some ways. Like James and I have met here and there, from when we knew that we would do it, we've spent a couple afternoons here and there. The actual in the theater space will probably be that Sunday, whatever that is, the 15th or 16th, and the days leading up to Thursday. So, it's been a lot on me to make sure that I'm off book, and then we'll continue to meet between now and that Sunday, but the crunch of time will be in those 4 days or so before.
So as you're doing this now, you really can't rewrite in between rehearsals. I mean, you can change little bits and pieces, but basically you have to take the script that you've got, or do you have that opportunity to rewrite and after the first rehearsal go, well, that doesn't work, let's try this?
I think that opportunity's there. I don't think that big structural changes will happen between now and the performances in July, but definitely lines here and there get shifted, and it's, well, does this make more sense? Will this, so little stuff for sure.
How did you get into theater in the first place? What made you was it a play that you saw or an experience you had that you said, I've got to do this?
Well, it's and that's a little bit in the play. So the first acting experience I had was in 8th grade at Annunciation playing Jesus in the 8th grade Passion play that was directed by a pedophile priest. And so that was the first time I had ever acted. And I remember feeling no nerves being up in front of people. And I had always had lots of nerves being up in front of people. So I remember that experience, but then that just kind of went on the back burner until I was like 22 and kind of lost, not really going anywhere and dropping in and out of community college. And I finally applied to a college as a theater major, having never acted in between the Passion play when I was 13 and 22. And from there on, the community in theater is just the absolute best. And there's so much of that initial healing happened among the being around theater people, engaging with plays, and just the vulnerability and the acceptance that that community offers was what sustained me to continue.
Yeah. I mean, you've got this clinical practice now, but you were able to break away from it to do the Wham production of What the Constitution Means to Me. And that was quite a time commitment.
Yes. Yeah, I scheduled people around the rehearsals, around the performances, and days off I would be working with people, but it was certainly not the full-time work that it is when I'm not doing theater. And I don't know where this run of, I feel really lucky. That experience at Berkshire Theater Group and with Wham and with all those people was just an incredible one. And I feel really grateful to have had it, and I'll see where this little run of theater goes, and just try and keep working with clients along at the same time.
How did you connect with Berkshire Theater and Wham?
I had done some readings at Wham as part of their Fresh Take series. I think I had auditioned for them at one point, and then I was doing Outside Mullingar, and Ron Kimura, who was in the play as well, he's like, hey, I'm going to audition for this reading. Why don't you come? And so I did, and I got into that reading. And then I'd done a few readings, got to know Talia and Kristen a little bit, and they called me and said, hey, we're doing What the Constitution Means to Me. Do you want to come in and read for the Legionnaire? So I did, and that monologue in there is real similar to some monologues that are in my solo show. And so when we got to talking, and Kristen was like, does this resonate with you, this material? I was like, yeah, this resonates. And so it was really, Talia and Kristen went to bat for me. I'd never worked at Berkshire Theater Group before, and they were like, they brought me along.
How many plays can you do over the course of a year and still run your practice and work on your own work?
I'm not sure. This year I'll find out a little bit. I'm doing What the Constitution Means to Me again in Albany in the fall at Capitol Rep. My plan is to try and run this solo show at a few other theaters, see if I can just get some more performances under my belt. And then I think I'll be doing something in the beginning of next year at Majestic. So this time next year, I'll be able to answer this question a little better. I'm thinking maybe three plays a year, and then see if once I get mine up on its feet, I feel like it'll be pretty portable.
Do you have a preference as an actor to doing drama or comedy, or do you like it all?
I like it all. I like finding comedy within drama. The solo show here, although it's a heavy topic, hopefully has its comedic moments and the moments that let us off the hook. And it's the way I love the blend that's in what the Constitution means to me, where you can find yourself laughing one moment and then the next moment something very different.
I did not get to see it at Wham Berkshire Theater, but I did see the national tour of it. I found it to be a fascinating play. And they handed out at the end of the show copies of the Constitution. I don't think I read it from the time I was in 8th grade to the present time, but it was a fascinating experience.
Yeah. I love that bit of like communicating with the audience and looking for audience participation. And I it was just a great experience too, going into my own solo show to get to be up on stage and watch Kate Baldwin work in essentially, it's not a solo show, but it is.
It is, and really. It is. I mean, not to denigrate the role that you played or the other person, but that is a major 2-hour piece of theater.
Yeah.
So when you do your own solo work, how do you maintain your energy? Because you have nobody to act off of. It becomes you and the audience. That makes it much different than if you're in an ensemble piece and you have somebody to share the talent with.
Yeah. And I think the audience provides a lot. That was one of the things that I really got reacquainted with and learned. I watched Kate interact with the audience and see what it was, what the audience was giving. And so I'm hoping to be able to put some of that to use. And then, I guess the thing that's a little different is I play different characters in the solo show. So although there are scenes within myself, I'm hoping that I can, sustain the energy by switching back and forth between characters. And they are, there are scenes.
Okay. Jay, we're going to take a quick break to acknowledge our underwriters that make Artsbeat possible. We're chatting with Jay Sefton, who is starring in his one-person show, Unreconciled, which runs July 20th and 21st at Chester Theater Company in Chester, Massachusetts. James Barry will direct that. If you want tickets and information, you can find that at chestertheater.org. Peter Coles is our chief engineer, and we'll return after these messages.
Support for community radio on WSKB provided by Westfield Electroplating. Employing over 140 skilled platers, painters, and technicians, Westfield Electroplating was founded in 1946 and was the first company in the country to achieve National Aerospace and Defense Contractor Program accreditation, proudly maintaining that status for over a decade. Westfield Electroplating provides over 50 quality finishes to meet your corrosion, cosmetic, or performance needs. On the web at www.westfieldplating.com or 413-568-3716. Westfield Electroplating, putting the finishing touches on technology.
Underwriting support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Greater Westfield Chamber of Commerce, the voice of business for the Greater Westfield communities. Informing, educating, advocating, the Chamber provides opportunities for members to make meaningful connections on local, regional, and state levels. For more information on the Chamber's many events, workshops, and programs, as well as the benefits of membership, visit westfieldbiz.org. The Chamber focuses on the most important economy, yours.
Join me, Tina Gorman, each week from 6 to 8 a.m. for Wake Up Wednesday, when my guests and I discuss health, wellness, and lifestyle reimagined.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Artsbeat, everyone. I'm Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. If you've missed a part of today's program or you want to watch it again or share it with your friends, we've archived it on YouTube under WSKB Community Radio. We're chatting with the actor Jay Sefton, who is starring in his one-person show Unreconciled at Chester Theatre Company, July 20th and 21st. You know, Jay, what brought you to Western Massachusetts, and what made you stay here as a creative? All of a sudden, in the last 15 years or so, we built up a community of actors and theater people that make Western Mass their home year-round, and they're able to work in the area as well as in theaters all over the country. What brought you here and made you stay here?
So I had been living in Los Angeles for about 13 years, and 2 of those years, early on, I worked at a restaurant with a woman, and we were just friends, and things happened over time. She moved to Cape Cod. We reconnected in 2010, and originally I'm from Philadelphia, and I happened to be back in Philadelphia, and she was like, send an email. We met in New York, and I ended up moving to Truro, and we lived there for about out on the Cape, and I lived there for about 5 years. Our rental was going to be sold, and we had to find a place to live, and I had a romantic notion about Amherst. We had never been out here before. And I just had this thought of like, oh, leaves falling and bells ringing and people reading books and stuff. So we came out here for a weekend and stayed in Northampton, and loved the weekend enough to rent a place in Hadley, and said, let's see what it's like for a year to live here. And it was the theater community and the community that you just spoke of that kept us here. We got involved pretty quickly, and I was finishing up my internship through school, and we stayed, and it's just been the best. I mean, this is such a wonderful place to live for all the reasons of the 5 colleges and the arts community and the beauty. And that community that you described is exactly what kept us here.
It's the same for me. I mean, I came back. I grew up here, actually, and then left and lived all over the country and came back. But there's something about the creative people here in Western Massachusetts, plus the ability that I can do my broadcasting work, and I have a public relations company that I also do, and I can work in theater if I want to, although I don't do much stage work anymore, or I can work in music, and it's just the people that you meet here are just so interesting and so different.
Yeah, and there's not that crush. The quality of life is wonderful here. I mean, everything, and for good reason. New York and Los Angeles are big struggles. To keep, but here, it just feels like you don't miss out on too much, and there's so much to be gained. And I feel quite lucky to have landed here.
And you're able to balance the acting and the playwriting and everything else with having your own clinical practice, which you probably couldn't do in a big city.
Yeah. I've got some friends in Los Angeles who have also, one in particular that I'm thinking of that has become a therapist. And the acting hasn't found a way back in yet. And I think it will, but it's certainly easier here, if it seems so.
If Unreconciled does well in its initial workshop, I would assume that you're going to want to take it elsewhere down the road. Do you think that ultimately you'll turn to writing other things? Do you have another play in you or a book in you, or is this a one-shot deal?
I don't know. My wife is a writer and she's a writer. And I don't see myself as like necessarily a writer. I don't know. I didn't know that I would do a second solo show. I thought that first one was all that I had in me. And I've written some essays and stuff. I can't imagine looking at an entire book. That just seems really daunting. Perhaps there's another play. I don't have anything like percolating where I want to kind of run this one through to its end and see what that might be.
Do you think it's something that only you will do down the road, or can you foresee another actor taking on that role at some point?
I don't know. That's a really interesting question because our last Saturday night performance of What the Constitution Means to Me, Heidi Schreck came to see it. And that was kind of the first time I ever thought, oh, I wonder what that would be like to sit in a theater and watch someone else do a work that's personal in that way. And I don't know. I'd certainly be open to.
Yeah, but you know what? Heidi Schreck wrote a play in which she starred. There were other characters in it. You're writing something very personal about your own life that only you can star in. So I wonder if down the road, you as the psychologist, and you would know this, how you might react to some other artist taking on the work and trying it out, whether it would change it, because every actor brings their own personal experiences to a play, and how it would feel to see someone else doing your work.
I don't know. I mean, I think it would be a good problem to sit with those feelings if it ever got to a point where someone was like, I'd like to give that a shot. I mean, they'd be playing my dad and my mom, I don't know. But I'd love for that to be a thought.
And so the show at Chester is a workshop, and there's a possibility, I guess, that it could go elsewhere. You sort of alluded to that afterwards. So I guess you'll take a wait and see to how it's received. Will there be any talkbacks with the audience after the shows?
Yes. I'm not sure if it'll be on both nights but it'll definitely be on one of them. And I don't, I hope so.
That's fantastic. So I guess as they say, as we're rolling into this, the pressure is on because you have to learn your lines. You have to create with James Barry and your co-writer. Will your co-writer be at rehearsals or just you?
I think it'll just be me. Last I talked to Mark, I think he said his flight was going to get in on the 20th, and he would see me at the theater.
At the theater.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I just think it's got to be really exciting to have this opportunity. Most people never get a chance to create their own work.
Yeah, I'm really grateful, and I'm excited and nervous and just thrilled that it's going to get an opportunity to get in front of an audience and see what's there, see what works.
So, Jay, if people want to learn more about Jay Sefton, are you on social media? Do you have a website? How can people learn more about you?
My website is my therapy website. It's jsefton.com. I'm not huge in social media. I mean, I am on Twitter at Jay Sefton, and that has been mostly for the work with other survivors and getting involved in that community. And so that would be a place.
Terrific. And people can learn more about the play at chestertheater.org. It's, again, July 20th and 21st, directed by James Barry. Jay, thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much, Mark.
I'm looking forward. I'm hoping I can get up and see the performance. I'm intrigued by it, and I hope you'll come back after at some point down the road and tell us how it went.
Totally, I would love to.
Terrific. We've been chatting with Jay Sefton. Go see him in Unreconciled, his autobiographical one-man show, workshopping and world premiering at Chester Theatre Company July 20th and 21st. We'll be back with more Artsbeat after we acknowledge our underwriters. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. I'm Mark Auerbach.
1 minute, 2